Today on The Real Story, last session, members of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus marked a lot of successes. From social justice bills to community investments, the caucus helped move a lot of their priorities forward. But now we are in the thick of a new, shorter session, and their work isn't done. We talk with the caucus's vice chair, State Representative Bobby Gibson, and the chair, State Representative Geraldo Reyes, to hear what they're trying to prioritize this year. Plus, several weeks ago, we had Costa Diamantis on our program, the former top budget official at the center of an FBI investigation. This morning, we're going to break down pieces of that interview with Hartford Courant columnist Kevin Rennie, who has closely followed the investigation, his thoughts on Mr. Diamantis' responses to our questions. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. This shorter legislative session started at the beginning of February, so lawmakers, as we said, are in the thick of it. Only so many weeks to get so much done, and it's all happening on an election year for the entire legislature as well. Now, the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is coming off a banner year for legislation last year. For example, social justice bills were passed in response to the national George Floyd movement, the police accountability bill growing out of that. So we want to have caucus leaders back on the program to catch up and hear what their priorities are for this session. Joining me this morning, the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus Chair, State Representative Geraldo Reyes from Waterbury, and the Vice Chair, State Representative Bobby Gibson, who represents Bloomfield and Windsor. Welcome back to the program to both of you.
Thank you, Ms. Jen. Thank you for the opportunity. And as chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, we have a short session, which is going to be a heavily packed short session, because normally the short session is usually just a fine-tunement for the appropriations and making sure that the budget aligns, the biennium budget aligns. But this is a very different type of short session where there's a lot of important bills that we're working on based on and built off the back of last year's BPRC successes, and that is the Community Investment Act 2030, which is almost $1 billion invested back into communities of need, communities of color. The baby bonds bill, which was an enormous bill, which we believe is one that will help neutralize the level and playing field of helping get our children to the next level of building wealth, generational wealth, educationally and or through home ownership. Paid family leave, and the increase of the educational sharing funds for education, which is always a big issue for us, as most of our inner city municipalities are majorly underfunded. So built on the backs of last year's success, we go into this year tackling again the issue of solitary confinement, which passed both houses and passed the House and the Senate, and was not signed was vetoed by the governor. We couldn't get that in. And that's a big priority for us, along with juvenile justice reform. Again, looking at educational cost sharing, and what will the equity and the fairness look like in both mental health and in housing.
And you all were just saying that the solitary confinement bill had some progress last week, right, Representative Gibson?
Yes, actually we did. We actually had a meeting with the DOC commissioner last week, and he was very excited that there's some ground breaking was taking place, that all to come together, and perhaps this is something that we can get done this year. It's very important to our constituents who really fought for that bill, and it's important to our inmates. And as everyone should be aware of, that the majority of the people that are incarcerated in the state of Connecticut are people of color. So, being the leaders of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, this is something that is high on our list to make sure it gets done.
Representative Reyes, I know you had discussed when we were talking about doing this interview before that mental health and what that looks like for our children is also a caucus priority. We know that both members of the Republican and Democratic parties as well. So this is something that seems to have a lot of bipartisan support. And you had specifically pointed to one of the bills that would increase HB 5001 that would improve the availability and provision of mental health, behavioral health, and substance use disorder treatment services for children. And this is coming off of the pandemic, right? So what's the need out there that you all are seeing?
That's a great question, and I want to give credit to one of our colleagues in the House of Representatives, Representative Tammy Exum, who is one of the co-leaders of that bill. There's many associates, but it does have buy-in from the BPRC, and one of the leaders is one of our own, Representative Exum, which and I want to go back between House Bill 5001 and Senate Bill 1. So both houses have prioritized mental health as a very, very important issue for our constituents in the state of Connecticut. And coming off the 2 years of the pandemic, nobody has suffered more than children. In fact, some of the biggest loss in time and in educational gains have come from the school-age children. And we believe that right now we're at the point where whether it's a family, a child, an educator, an administrator, regardless, all the people that are around the educational field and supporting the educational field have been greatly affected. And we are excited that we have to be able to talk about these things, as folks of color, that sometimes we don't tend to talk about these issues. And I think that we just have to understand that it's okay to be not okay, and it's okay to go ahead and get help. And that's why we're stressing these bills, because if we don't have our mental health, none of the other bills that we work on will matter, because you need your health before you can have anything else.
Yeah, so true. The need out there, certainly great after the pandemic. Okay, let's talk about juvenile justice reform, Representative Gibson, because this is something that Republicans have been calling for since before the session started. It's something that the governor even signaled that he would maybe take a look at. So where does your caucus stand? Is there room to do something on this?
There's always room. Although it's a short session, there's always time to do what's right. And I know Reyes is going to agree. This is something that our caucus is on top of. Juvenile justice is something that we just can't allow to just not give attention to. I mean, we have children out there who are suffering. I mean, kids are not born to do bad things. Kids are born sweet and innocent. They're learned behaviors. And so what we have to do is we have to meet them where they are. I think as a state, we're actually failing some of our juveniles. We're not providing them with the education that they need totally to meet their needs. Some of the social aspects of their lives are being not being addressed. You go into schools, we don't have some of the things that we used to have in schools, the automotive, the woodworking, things that would take kids' attention and have them focus on other things. So again, this is something that's very important and dear to us. The answer is not to just lock kids up or give them stricter penalties. That's not helping kids be where they need to be successful. What we need to do is find out what's causing these things and solve them.
Representative Reyes?
My thoughts on this is I'm excited that during the week there was a bipartisan effort reached in judicial on this particular bill. And yes, it was an outcry by many Republicans. And I'm happy to report that on the bill that came out of judicial, all 15 Republicans on the Judicial Committee voted for this bill to move forward. So that's great progress, considering that they've reached a stalemate a couple times while they were in negotiations over the summer. And this started back in August. And there was some things that the far left wanted, and there were some things that the far right wanted. And I think they came somewhere in the middle. And I want to give credit where credit is due to the Judicial Committee's leadership under Senator Winfield, who's kept a close eye on this. So I'm happy to report that there are things that both sides have gotten to the table. Is it a perfect bill? Probably not, but it's a step in the right direction. We changed the detainment hours from 6 to 8 hours to be able to get a judge to sign off if we need it. There's the second for harsh offenses, second offense on auto thefts and or any kind of burglary. And now there's the monitoring system on those particular individuals, where today that doesn't exist. And I think that, as Representative Gibson alluded to, we do need to continue to supply and put the right funds back into the programs that have shown success in the inner cities. We don't want to fund everybody. We want to fund the ones that are actually working for our youth and doing everything possible to keep them out of harm's way.
That does sound an efficient way to look at it, for sure. And just Representative Reyes, real quick, which bill is it that you're talking about that has bipartisan support with juvenile justice?
Wait, hang on, I'm going to give it to you right now.
Yeah.
I just wrote it down. Give me 1 second.
Representative Gibson, we're about to end the segment, but while he's looking that up, do you want to just tell us other quick priorities that you have that if you have time this session you want to touch on? I know housing was one of them, right?
Well, housing is definitely one. There's evictions are high, but I'm going to leave that for Rep. Reyes because I know in his district housing is a concern. But I will add out there that there's the captive audience bill that has to do with workers holding their workers captive in these meetings that they need not be in. That's Senate Bill 163 and Senate Bill 318 out of labor with Rep. Porter from New Haven is working on. It's also the Fair Work Week, House Bill 5353, that provide workers adequate time to know if their schedule is going to be changed. And I will also add, before we get off, Senator Moore is working on a gun violence bill. That's very important.
Okay, yeah, I know the captive audience bill we've had on the CBIA and we've had on Connecticut AFL-CIO president discussing that, so that's been thoroughly covered on this program as well. Representative Reyes, did you find that bill? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I did. Yeah, no problem. Juvenile Justice Reform Bills 5417, and as I said, it got out of committee with only 4 no votes, and all 15 Republicans voting for it. So it's a step in the right direction. Just wanted to touch real quick on housing. I think the housing situation is a crisis that's waiting to go off a cliff in the late spring, early summer, because now with the courts fully open, we are seeing the eviction rates go up in all the large municipalities in particular, and it's such an issue right now that eviction rates are actually being charted. So there's a daily an app you can go to see the amount of evictions that are happening, where they're happening, which city, and at what rate. And I'll talk about Waterbury really brief, real quick, unofficially about 10 a week. That's a lot of people on the street, a lot of families. And this upsets the entire evolution of the whole work cycle, family cycle, school cycle, because if you don't have the consistency of a roof over your head, that will affect everything else that comes down through the society.
No doubt about that. All right, State Representative Geraldo Reyes and State Representative Bobby Gibson, thank you both so much for coming on The Real Story once again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for having us.
All right, coming up on The Real Story, former top budget official Costa Diamantis under an FBI probe into his role in construction projects around the state. And several weeks ago, he came on The Real Story where we asked some pressing questions on the investigation and the accusations that he threatened towns and cities to hire certain contractors. We're going to break down parts of that interview with Hartford Courant columnist Kevin Rennie, who was the first to really break news about the investigation several months ago. We'll be right back.